Hey guys, today we're going to do a quick tutorial on SwiftUI+Combine. So we're going to quickly go over publishers and subscribers and how to build a form with validation and have the button either be enabled or disabled based on the entries of the field. And we're going to use Combine's publisher and subscribers to do that. So let's get started. Alright, so we're gonna get started on this tutorial. Start by creating a new app. Product name, we're just gonna call this form validation. Interface is SwiftUI. Lifecycle is SwiftUI app. Create the project. Alright, so here's our usual template and our content view. So we're gonna start this by creating a model. So create a new file, make it a Swift file. We'll call this file user info model. User info model. Alright, so we have our model here. Our model is going to be our user info model is going to be a class. User info model, it's going to conform to observable object, and inside we have two published property. Published, and the first variable will be first name, and the second variable will be email. So it's going to be a simple form. So it's going to have first name and email and a little button, but this is the model that our form is gonna take. So it's gonna just take in the first name and email. So we're just gonna have these two variables inside of our user info model. So far so good. And here in our content view, we're gonna have we're also gonna have a user info model variable, and we're just gonna tag this with observed object for user info model, and we're gonna create this by initializing user info model that we just had created there. Alright, and so we're gonna replace our, actually let me run this first. Maybe the error will go away. So instead of our text for our body, we're gonna have a form. So build succeeded. I think it was just a false error. So let it run, and then we'll keep on coding in the background. So we're gonna have a navigation view for our body, and then inside of the navigation view we're gonna have a form, and inside the form we're gonna have sections. We're gonna have two sections, one for the name and one for the email. So we're gonna do section header. We're just gonna call this we're gonna call it name, and content of the section would be, let's say in this section we have one text field, and in text field we're just gonna have a placeholder called first name, and our text would be stored into this user info model dot first name. Alright, so that's our basic form. So this was the previous hello world text view before we did this code. So let's run this, and then I think we'll see a form. You'll see a form with one section called name with a field called first name. So let's see if this is the case. So running this, Right. It's taking some time to load. So up there it is. So here we have a name section and we have a first name text field as expected. So let's copy this over and add our other section for email. Text field would be email, and the section header title now is email, and we're gonna store this in user info model.email. All right, so now we have the two sections. We're gonna add a third section. This one's gonna be actually, we're not gonna add a third section. Instead of a section, we're just gonna add a button. So we'll do button. Our button, let's say we have let's see, let's do this one with the action and with the label. Our action. All right, let's not do anything in the action for now, because I think this tutorial, the goal is to show you enabling and disabling of the button based on the entries of these fields. So we don't need any actions for now. So for now, let's just run the app and for sanity check, just to see that we see what we're expected to see, which is a form with two sections called name and email, and a button that should be enabled by default. So let's see if this is the case. Alright, so this is what we see. First name, email, and button, just as we described here in our code. So for our button, alright, so for our button, we have an option to enable and disable the button by adding this modifier called .disable. It's either going to be true or false. Let's say it's true for now and run it again, and then we're going to see that our button will be disabled because we've modified the button's disable property to true. So we're running this, and when it launches, the button should now be disabled. So now the button is no longer clickable. Alright. Alright, so the button's no longer clickable, and then now what we're gonna do is let's add one more thing. The form looks a little bit, let's just add the navigation bar title. Navigation bar title, not necessary, but we're just gonna call it form for now. Alright, so for our the purpose of this tutorial is we're gonna modify this this user info model so that it does some sort of validation, so that would trigger like either enabling or disabling the button. So what we're gonna do first is, let's say we're gonna let's see, what should we do first? We should have like an email validator, for example. So the email will just have like some sort of validator to see if it's a valid email. And for the first name, we're not gonna check too much. We're just gonna check to see that for the alright, so for the email, we'll have an email like checker to check the validation of the format of the email, and for the name, as long as it's not empty, it's gonna be valid. So that would be our rule. So for we can start by this for the email. So we can extend ns regular expression for our email, and then we're gonna have struct constants So we're basically gonna create a email pattern. So I've already done it here once to kind of show you that this is what a regular expression of an email pattern looks like. So here's the email pattern, and we're gonna have an email validator. So we're gonna have another structure, struct email validator, and so here we're gonna have a static function call is valid, and we're gonna take an email here. So we're gonna have an email regular expression, email regex. It's gonna be ns regular expression, and then for the ns regular expression dot constants dot email pattern. That's this is the pattern that's defined here. So that's our email regular expression, and we're gonna have an email predicate. Let email predicate equals ns predicate with the format, and the format is gonna be self matches %at, and our object that we want to match is email regex, and then we're gonna return email predicate dot evaluate with email. All right, so this function, you pass in a string, and it's gonna try to evaluate whether or not it matches the regular expression, the email pattern regular expression here. So let's see. Email predicate unexpected return of a non-void. So we want to return a boolean here to kind of so that this function will answer the question of whether this email is a valid email or not. So that's that, and we're gonna have another extension. This one will be to actually validate the form. Mark, let's just call this validations. All right. Extension user info model. So let's say we're gonna have we're just gonna have another variable call validated credentials publisher. It's gonna be of type any publisher actually here. So then we need to import combine. Alright, so it's gonna be of type any publisher. The type will be bool and never. So this is the type of the publisher, and this is the error type of what the error can be. So since in our case we're never gonna have an error, so we can denote that with never. And in some cases that we're gonna have some sort of error that we can specify, we can do that over here. So this publisher, this like our custom made publisher, is just gonna return a boolean. So it's gonna let us know whether this this combination for the user info model is valid or not. So let's just say first name dot combine latest. We're gonna combine this with the email, and so we're gonna have two objects that we're gonna evaluate. Alright, so we have our first name here and our email here. You can combine multiple objects, more than two. Like for example, if there's more variables here, you can add these. I think the limit is 4 if I remember correctly, but anyway, so we have, we can combine these two, and from what we get from first name and email, we can determine whether or not the model is valid. So here we're just gonna do just for checking, we're just gonna return true, like we're not gonna do anything yet, and then we're gonna call dot erase to any publisher, which is basically gonna return us the any publisher that that we want. So here, when we call validated credentials publisher, and we combine the first name and email, we're just gonna return true for now. No real logic yet, and we're just gonna see what we can do in the content view. So when we go back to our content view, let's add another state. We have a state called be a variable called valid credentials. Initially would be false. Initially, let's just say the credentials are not valid. And here, where is it? Disable. So instead of true, we're just gonna look at our valid credentials. So if it's valid credentials, we don't want to disable it, so we negate that, and we can call dot on receive, which is gonna basically subscribe to our publisher, and it will perform some action after that. So on receive, which publisher do we want to subscribe to? We can say user info model dot validated credentials publisher. That's the publisher that we just created. Perform is when the on receive is triggered. Actually, we can remove a couple things here to make the code a little bit easier to read. All right, so missing perform in call. Actually, here we'll just leave it. I got a little bit confused deleting brackets. Let's just leave it for now. All right, perform. So when we received this is either going to be true or false. Let's just call it is valid user info, and then we're just gonna assign valid credentials. We're just gonna assign that to valid credentials. So we're just gonna do that. So this variable here, which is either true or false, will be assigned to here, and from here the button will either be disabled or enable. So according to our definition in the validated credentials publishers, we're just gonna return true, as in the form is valid. So when it's true here, valid credentials are true, and disable is not true. So basically, don't disable the button. So when we run this and we have the initial form, the button is going to be enable based on the code written here. So let's see if this is the case. Alright, so the button is enable, which is what we expected. That's good. So now let's have some logic inside of a user info model. So that instead of returning true, we're gonna use these first name and email in order to determine the validity of the model. So let's just say return all right, let is valid email. So we'll have a is valid email variable, and so we have this here, email validator dot is valid, and then we're going to pass in the email, and from here this function is going to tell us whether this is valid or not. And so here we're just going to return is valid email. So here we're only validating the email to make sure that that the email is valid. So if the email is valid, the button is also going to be valid. So this is not looking at the first name object yet. So let's run this. All right, so here's our form. See, now the button is disabled. So for email, tap onto our email field. All right, we're just gonna type something. It's not enabled yet, the button, but then add something dot something. Right, so now you can see that this is a valid email format, and now the button is disabled. So if we make it like not a valid email format anymore, see how the button is disabled? So that it didn't affect anything with the first name at all. So first name can have something or doesn't have to have anything. The button will be enable or disable solely based upon the validity of the email. So here let's do let's also take first name into consideration. Let is valid first name. We didn't have a validator for that. I mean, you can do something more complex, but for me, we're just gonna do just to show the point, we're just gonna do first name is empty. So so we're just gonna say if first name is not empty, so if there's something in that text, it's just gonna be a valid first name. All right, and then so return is valid email and is valid first name. All right, so once we do that, this this publisher will only be true if the first name is valid and the email is valid. And in the content view, in the content view, we have the button whose disabled property is going to be based on the valid credentials, which is either true or false. And this valid credentials is modified by this publisher. So when we have a value here that is valid, it's either going to be true or false according to that function, and from that it's going to assign that value to this and to this valid credentials property, and the button will get triggered from here. So now let's relook at this again. It's just saying there's something in the first name field and that the email is a valid property. So we're running this. All right, so here's our name and email. Oops, here. We'll type something in our email field again. All right, email something at something dot something. All right, so this is a valid email format, but you see how the button is not disabled. So now once we type something in the first name, now the button automatically becomes enable. And the same thing when we remove the email format and it's no longer a valid email format, the button becomes disabled again. So now that it's a valid email format and there's something in the first name, the button becomes enable. So that's basically the whole email validation, where you create your own publisher in the user info model, and in your content view you actually have the view subscribe on the on receive function. Like this one can, like, you can subscribe on here also, like for example dot on receive, and then so you subscribe to some publishers, and then when that publisher sends back some signal, and then you can perform some sort of actions. And you can have multiple publishers. Like for example, if you want to have another publisher called like add letter publisher, and this one also of type any publisher, but instead of bool, let's say you want it to be a string, and again it's never going to send back any error. So we can have first name, and we don't have to always use combine. So let's say we just want to modify the first name. So first name, we can use the map operator. So it's gonna map, let's see, first name dot map. So we're just gonna transform, let's say first name. We're just gonna return first name plus a letter, first name plus a, for example, and then dot erase to any publisher to return the any publisher. So now we have a second publisher, which is called add letter publisher. So you can have multiple of these, and let's see how to use it. So now we're just gonna add -a or -a to whatever the first name is. And so to display that, maybe for our name section, or let's say we add a text. Let's say we add a text, like a text view. Let's just say we add a text view, and then our text view, let's just have something simple, modify name, and then for modify name, let's see. Alright, so text view first name. Alright, so text view first name, let's just have here, just a quick example. We're just gonna have another state variable similar to what we did for valid credentials state variable. We're just gonna call this modify name, and let's just say it doesn't have anything for now. So in our text modify name, we're just gonna show this modify name, this variable here. And for our text field, we're just gonna call on receive on this, and instead of the validated credentials publisher, we're just gonna subscribe to user info model dot add letter publisher. So now whatever we type for the first name, this publisher is going to add a -a to it, and when we receive something, let's say we're just going to assign this, let's call this mod name. So when we're going to assign this to modify name, mod name. Alright, let's just run this and see. So here we've so I'm running it. So here we've added a second publisher called add letter publisher. So whatever the first name field is, it's gonna add -a to it. But it's not gonna, and this is gonna get assigned to modify name when this publisher sends back the modified name, the signal, and we're gonna add it to the text view as modified name in part of the first section. So let's see if it loaded. So it ran. Let's see that this shows up here. Alright, so here is our text called modify name -a. It just shows -a because there's nothing there. Let's just in the first name, let's just type in YU. So now you see here YU-A, YUI-A. So that's our publisher, and our button is still disabled until the email is valid. Alright, and now it's valid email, the button is enabled again. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. We went over how to do form validation using SwiftUI+Combine publishers and subscriber method. Pretty simple one. So that's it for this tutorial, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.